préférez venir au pupitre après vous installer, vous rester sur cette plateforme? Attends, je vais laisser changer avec lui, moi je vais voir l'entrée. ça bouge assez, donc... Ouais.
Je vais mettre mon discours là, de toute façon.
Ouais, plus, moi de toute façon je serai là comme ça. Je vais essayer de pas toucher. Si je m'approche, on m'entend. C'est pas touché. Peut-être qu'ils disent au service audiovisuel que ça va commencer. Merci. We are going to begin. So, dear students, professors, members of the administration, and of course, dear guest from Alstom, Mr. Poupart-LAFARGE. First, a special shout to the students watching the conference from their room where it's streamed. It wasn't our choice, but don't worry, you will also get the opportunity to ask your questions. And I promise that for other HEC Débats conferences, you will get to have your seat in this room. I am Tanguy de Boisredon, M1 student and incoming president of HEC Débats. It's a great pleasure and an honor for me to be here today for the second lecture of the year in company of Alstom CEO Henri POUPART-LAFARGE. First, I would like to share a few words about HEC Débats, which is a speaker society of HEC Paris, founded more than 30 years ago. All year long, we host prestigious personalities ranging from former French presidents, CEOs, to prominent intellectuals. Conferences are held in French or English. I prefer French because it's not my mother. It's my mother tongue, but it can held in English too. And we try very hard to attract the most interesting guests and convince them to come to speak in front of you. This talk will give you a glimpse of what we do at HEC Débats and hopefully make you want to join the association. Before the conference starts, I would like to thank the administration of HEC Paris for making this conference possible, especially Raphaël Gauthier, Marcel Laliberté, and Philippe Auster. Thanks also to our partner, Mazar, which is very helpful for us. And most importantly, thank you, Henri POUPART-LAFARGE, for giving us some of your precious time to come, for coming all the way to HEC and sharing your precious experience. In addition, I want to thank all the team from Alstom, particularly Michel Boccaccio, Seka Krunik, and Bruno Tourne, with whom we have worked very closely all summer long to prepare this event. Now I'm hoping that this conference will give you some advice, which will be useful during your time at HEC and beyond. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Saousan, who will dress the portrait of Henri POUPART-LAFARGE, and to the moderators, Diane and Nicolas, who will interview Mr. POUPART-LAFARGE. Enjoy your conference and see you soon for new thrilling speakers. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, we are very delighted to have you all here tonight for our luncheon conference. And I would like to thank you all in advance for entrusting us with your unwavering attention all throughout this conference. Well, here at HEC Paris, we live and die for our commitment to success, excellence, and knowledge, especially when it comes from renowned and brilliant people shaping the outside business world. So it is with special excitement that I am pleased to welcome, on behalf of HEC Débats, Mr. Henri POUPART-LAFARGE to this conference. For the few in this room who don't know him yet, trust me on this, the man definitely has what it takes to inspire you. Henri POUPART-LAFARGE is the CEO of Alstom, a global leader in the transportation sector since his appointment for this position in 2016. Well, you may wonder how he managed to rise through the ranks of Alstom and become the successful CEO we all know of today. From my standpoint, I would say he owes it to three things. First, obviously, his ambition. He was born in 1969 to a very stimulating, emulating, hard-working environment. His ambition nurtured diverse interests that have shaped him into a jack-of-all-trades somehow. He's an engineer, yet defines stereotypes with a strong background in economy and finance. And he enjoys a first-row position in the fight for a greener transportation deal for Europe as the head of l'UNIF, l'Union des Industries Ferroviaires Européennes. Second, his spotless educational record. He graduated as an engineer from both École Polytechnique and l'École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussées, and later on became an MIT graduate. Finally, his first professional steps set the tone for the rest of his career. He started in 1992 at the World Bank in Washington, later on joined the French Ministry of Economy and Finance, and in 1998 joined Alstom as head of investor relations and internal control. He then became CFO in 2004, later was promoted president of Alstom's transport sector, which was the one final step before his appointment for CEO in 2016. So now that you all have his career path in mind, you obviously know that you can't reduce a man to his resume, even less so when it's Henri POUPART-LAFARGE. So now let me tell you more about his engagements, what he worships and strives for, both as the CEO of a global and strategic company and as a responsible citizen. Being the CEO of a global leader of transportation, his views on the environment have some weight, particularly so knowing that the transportation sector by itself is accountable for 30% of carbon emissions. This is a cause M. POUPART-LAFARGE is particularly drawn to through his commitment to making Alstom comply with ESG norms. But not only. M. Henri POUPART-LAFARGE champions the idea that the whole future of the transportation sector must be seen through the lens of fighting against global warming. Mobility and ecology must go hand in hand, and mobility should be reinvented in a way that makes it durable, time efficient, energy efficient, and that doesn't hurt future generations and wouldn't generate damages that are extremely difficult to overcome. He even recently stated before the National Assembly that he was completely in favor of the government's policy change, namely its plan to bar flights whenever there is a 4-hour train alternative. The train, according to Henri POUPART-LAFARGE, is the safest alternative, 100 times safer than a car, and on the whole, a far less polluting and subsidized industry. Well, now that I have gone through what I think were the most relevant preliminary pieces of information, I am going to slip away and allow you to hear from the man himself. Mr. Henri POUPART-LAFARGE, the floor is all yours.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I have to say it's the first time I have the opportunity and the honor to hold such a conference in front of so many students here in the room, but I know also a number of you behind your screens. So I'll just introduce Alstom for a few minutes, and I think after that it's a great opportunity to have a dialogue with you two and with all the room. Alstom is, as it being said, and it has already been very well introduced, Alstom is a global company focusing on rail transportation. When we say that we are a global company, I can say without any arrogance that probably all of you have already onboarded one of our trains in the past, wherever you come from. We have supplied metros in most of the large cities in the world. We have mainline trains, so of course the very well-known, very high-speed trains in France, but we have regional trains all across Europe. We are introducing the very high-speed train in the US. So from Australia to China, to Brazil, to all countries in Latin America, to Southeast Asia, we are a global company. We are in trains, and we are well known, and all what I've quoted so far are actually what we call rolling stock, i.e. trains from tram, metros, regional trains, mainline trains. But these activities, what we call the rolling stock activities, the pure equipment, is only half of our activity, 50% of our activity. The rest is divided either between signaling. So what we call signaling is the way to manage your trains, so that of course they don't crash into each other, but also that the efficiency of the line is at its maximum. So we have to, of course, put as many trains as possible on one line to ensure that the traffic is being regulated and so forth. And this is a signaling activity, which is a pure software activity. And indeed, by the way, 2/3 to 70% more or less of our engineers in Alstom are software engineers. We are always seen as electromechanical, but it's software engineers mostly. Another activity is the maintenance of our trains. We don't do that in France, because in France, both RATP and SNCF are doing their own maintenance. But everywhere else in the world, the operators are subcontracting to us their maintenance, which means that we are committing for having a fleet being ready every morning for €1 per kilometer. Every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, you have the full fleet ready to be run by the operators. That's the second activity. And the third activity is infrastructure and system. Also not very well known in France, because it's usually SNCF, RATP, and the other operators are buying trains and buying the signaling activity, electrification in different lots. Elsewhere in the world, the new operators, they can buy the full system. For example, we go in Riyadh, and there is nothing, or in Dubai, it has been also the case. After 2 to 3 years, we deliver a full metro line with, of course, a partner, usually a civil work company doing all the tunnels, for example, or the viaduct, but we are doing everything else. The electrification, the signaling, the rolling stock itself, the integration of the system. So this is an activity which is extremely important, particularly, of course, on emerging countries, on fast-growing countries, which are building new lines and more lines. So you see, even though we are very well known for our trains, and you have onboarded most of you are trains, but it's only half of our activities. We have a large diversity of activity on our day-to-day business. Now, just to summarize a little bit the last 10 years at Alstom and the way we have moved in terms of strategy. 10 years ago, basically, Alstom was not a global company. 10 years, 15 years ago, we are not a global company. Of course, we have produced and we have delivered trains already a little bit around the world, but we were not present physically over the world. And we realized that, and 10 to 15 years ago, we said we need to be closer to our customer around the world. It's also something which was required by our customers, because all our customers are public entities, I mean, either municipalities, states, and so forth. So they were asking for localization of the employment, localization of the production. So during approximately 10 to 15 years, we spent an immense amount of work, an immense amount of investment to put new factories in different countries, new engineering capabilities in different countries, and new project execution capabilities. And we were actually building trains, but we are also building a lot of factories. So we put factories in India. We have now several factories in India, a very large engineering center in India. We put factories in South Africa. We put factories in Kazakhstan, in Brazil. We put factories in Australia, in Canada, everywhere. So we had, I think over the last 10 to 15 years, we increased the number of factories of Alstom by roughly 50% everywhere. And it was a huge challenge, because of course you need to grow the competence of the people locally. The railway industry was not so present in these countries. I mean, if you think about it, I don't know, I mean, you come from all the countries in the world, there was a lot of Line 1 being inaugurated during this time. I mean, we inaugurated Lima, Line 1, Panama, Line 1, Chennai, Line 1, meaning that in these countries, you had no railway system. So there were very few people familiar with the railway industry, familiar with the competences of the railways. So it was a huge work, which has, again, started, there is no one single moment, started 15 years ago, more or less, and which is now completed. Because, of course, now when you are a little bit everywhere on the different continents, in most of the countries, you cannot go beyond that. And by the way, the market is also now global. As I said, now that you have inaugurated Line 1 in most of the countries, now it's Line 2, Line 3, and it's another type of business model. So we had this, and I think we can say, and Alstom can say legitimately, that we are the most global company in the railway world. We are the company with the diversity of employment, which is the largest in the railway world. Progressively, what we figured out 3, 4, 5 years ago was the growing importance of sustainability. So we moved in terms of strategy. All our strategy was about, again, globalization and to think about how to implement what we knew how to do, but just to do it elsewhere. 3-4 years ago, we said we need to change a little bit our DNA towards sustainability. I give you just an example. 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, Alstom broke the record, the railway record, the speed record on rails at 574.8 kilometers per hour. This was 10 years ago. Nobody would dare in Alstom today to ask to go to 600, 650, because we cannot care less about to go to 600. We figured out that what our customer wanted, and as importantly was the citizen and the authorities and what the world wanted, was more efficient trains, greener trains, more sustainable trains, which means in terms of energy, of course, in terms of pollution in general, particle, in terms of noise, in terms of passenger experiences, fluidity of the journeys from A to B. All these concepts, which were not so present in Alstom in the past, because we were very much, I would say, speed, cost, and this kind of functionalities, had to be introduced progressively within the company. And we launched a new strategy 2 years ago, which we called Alstom in Motion, which basically has one goal, which is to improve the sustainable performance of our solutions in general. Whether we talk about the trains themselves, but of course about the systems, about the solution and the digital solution that we are providing. We are using a lot digital solutions, but we are not doing digital for digital. We use smart solution, again, to improve the environmental performance, not just for the sake of using digital equipment. We are using predictive maintenance, because if you want to have 24 hours a day the metro running, and you have seen that in a number of cities now which are requiring public systems to be running day and night, you need, of course, to have a very, very nice management system in order to manage your maintenance 24 hours a day. So that's where we are today. We have a lot of challenges on that respect. There are still, and you could say that, a lot of trains which are running on diesel, so it's not, we are far from being totally green. Half, you may not know, but half of the network, for example, in Europe is not electrified. This corresponds to 25% of the trains, because of course it's lower than city lines. That's why, and you probably have heard about it, I'm pushing so much, and I will finish by that, I'm pushing a lot the hydrogen economy in general, and hydrogen trains in particular. Alstom is proud to be the only one, the first one, but still the only one to run trains on hydrogen. So we have in Germany for the last 2 years now, we have been running some trains on normal services, and we are pushing a lot so that all the diesel trains are progressively replaced either by battery trains, but mostly by hydrogen trains. So just to let you know that the journey is still extremely long. Of course, as I said, our first goal, which was the globalization, is now behind us, but the next goal is extremely ambitious, and I don't know till when it will last. It's probably for the next decade, at minimum, in order to really to come with extremely efficient and green solutions. So this was a few words on Alstom, and now, of course, I'm more than open to answer to your question. Thanks a lot.
So first of all, thank you, Mr. Poupart-LAFARGE, for these very precise and committed presentation of Alstom's activities. I would like to precise 2 things before the dialogue actually starts. For our people on Zoom, thanks for joining us. This is a hybrid organization, but do not hesitate to ask your questions at any point. Just type them in the chat and we will answer them later. And the second point, this conference will be organized in 2 parts. First of all, we would like to discuss Alstom's activities and mobility in general, and then we will like to discuss your vision about management and your management style.
Okay, so I'll go for the first question. So with your presentation, we can realize that Alstom seems to be knowing a crucial phase of development and strategy currently. For example, last July, the European Commission approved the buyout of Bombardier Transport, the Canadian giant. So moreover, Alstom clearly states its will to commit more in an environmental friendly strategy and to better take advantage of big data, including for the traceability of transports, for example. So now, what are the next steps for Alstom? What are the current stakes? What's in this long journey you still have to make?
Thank you for the question. It's first you talked a little bit about Bombardier. I've not talked about Bombardier in my introductory comments. The acquisition of Bombardier will not change our strategy per se. Bombardier is a similar company as Alstom. It's another global railway manufacturer as well. It happens that Bombardier has strengths and weaknesses which are quite complementary than the one of Alstom, because the origin of Bombardier, as I said, it's Canadian, but it's also very much German. They are present in Mexico, where we are more present in Brazil. They are very much present in China, where we are very much present in India, and so forth. So the idea to acquire Bombardier is to increase the presence of Alstom and also to give a larger scale to Alstom in order to better innovate. Because as you said, and that's the second, the key topic for me, is that we are entering in a moment where innovation will be key to the future of Alstom. If you want to compare the moment, I was in Alstom, as being said previously, for the last 20 years, and Alstom was present in the past in power. And you had, during a decade or so, a lot of debates on the transition, the energy transition, and so forth. And at the time, you had no real debate on the mobility transition. And we are at that moment of mobility transition. We cannot say it will be parallel to the same kind of pattern as a power transition, which was a kind of replacement from old, basically coal-fired power plant to new renewable power plants. Today, for the mobility, it will be very different, the way it will be evolved, but still there is a huge transition away basically from cars, from single type of means of transportation to a much more complex solutions. And we need to find our place in this transition. We need to drive this transition, and this is our responsibility as a leader, but we need also to find the right place for Alstom within this new mobility scheme.
Thank you. As a CEO, you really seem to be very environmentally engaged, committed, and you make a point of developing Alstom's commitment towards a sustainable development. A French representative once said that you were kind of an eco-friendly boss. You even came here using your bike, so what better proof of it? And what concrete actions would you like Alstom to undertake to enter this mobility transition in the future?
So we need to define exactly what will be the next step for mobility. One of them, of course, is, as you said, the green. So green means CO2 free, and hence my point on hydrogen trains. So we need first to make sure that none of our trains are emitting CO2 per se, while they are running, also while they are produced. So we are as much committed for our trains, but we are also committed that our factories themselves are only using renewable energy. So the trains, as I said, there is still a lot of trains which are running on diesel. So we need to make sure that this is no more the case. And most of the operators are today committing on taking out of service all these diesel trains. But as importantly, we have a large fleet of electrical trains, and we need to improve their energy efficiency. So most of the trains, any new generation, for example, a new generation of very high-speed train, is decreasing the energy consumption by around 20 to 30%. So we are committing on all these kind of indicators to introduce new and better generation. Then for the global mobility, just one word on that, because it happens that the rest of the mobility is moving towards rail transportation. Not only in terms of modal shift, but it happens that cars are becoming electrical. Cars are becoming managed as a global fleet more and more, which was the case for the rail for a long time. So we have this advantage as compared to the car manufacturing industry, that we have managed already for a long time this kind of electrical equipment. We have also controlled the entire fleet of trains for a long time. That's why we have launched this electrical bus, which is a new type of bus, which is a very specific bus with a kind of tram DNA, which is a much more comfortable bus, because we thought that we have something to bring to this electrical mobility in general, because again, we have produced electrical vehicles for a long time.
Okay, thank you. You just mentioned the fact that there are a lot of possibilities and technical options for people to choose a greener mobility solution. I would like to ask you something about the scheme of consumption of these people. As the COVID-19 crisis is going on, do you believe that customers will now tend to use the train as their preferred transportation mean, because they have no longer used the airplane for months, and maybe they have gained this consciousness which they didn't have in the past? And do you also believe that official measures and governmental measures should be put in place to curtail the use of airplanes in favor of the train?
Yeah, I think the COVID crisis is of course very significant, has a very significant impact on mobility in general. Short term, our main priority is of course to make trains safe for all passengers. It was already something which was a trend and which was required by our customers, and we have, when you take a metro, for example, the poles now are antibacterial poles. You have the HVAC, which are also specific HVAC. We are using doors where you don't need to touch the door to open the doors and things like that. So it was already a trend, but this will accelerate a lot, of course, due to the COVID. What we believe is that COVID crisis has also been a kind of wake-up call, if I may say, for the climate change crisis. And people, we see all the stimulus packages which are launched by the different governments, all being extremely in favor of the green transition, because people realize that if they don't act, then what happens on the sanitary front will also happen on the climate change front. So we need to take advantage of that, take advantage, if I may say, of this crisis to accelerate all the moves in favor of the sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Alstom is one of the biggest French companies, a European leader in the transportation sector, and yet somehow it could not grow or develop as it would with the European context of competition laws and policies. So how does Alstom really deal with this European context? Is it really a burden for when it is to compete with international giants, including the Chinese ones, for example? I mean, what do you think of this?
Yes, first of all, I'm a strong European supporter. So I think that if anything, the railway market in general is much too scattered in Europe, with too many different types of standards, norms, and so forth. So I'm pushing for, and it has been mentioned that I'm the honor to share the UNIFE, which is the Railway Manufacturer Association at the European level. And I'm really pushing for one single European market in terms of rail. I think it's important for the efficiency of our business. Having said that, and you are referring to our failed attempt to merge with Siemens, our goal at the time was to improve a lot the digital technology and digital know-how of the company. I've not insisted enough on that, but smart solution, and you were mentioning data before, are increasingly important to the railway systems. I was mentioning to you before the meeting that between Paris and Lyon, there are 13 trains running per hour. 13, 1-3. With a new digital system that we are currently implementing, it will move from 13 to 16. And this, of course, increased by 20-25% the capacity of this line. So it's extremely important. What we do in Lille, we are implementing a new system for the metro of Lille. it will decrease the headway between two metros from 90 seconds to 60 seconds. Of course, while ensuring the total safety of the different metros. So the digital impact on our system is extremely important. So that's why we wanted to merge with Siemens, because Siemens Mobility, but Siemens Group has, of course, a large know-how in that. The European Commission saw that it was too smart as a deal, or too big as a deal, or prohibited us to do so. I think it's a pity, and I said it. I think it's a pity. I think we have extremely strong competitors everywhere in the world, and you have mentioned one in China, of course, which are benefiting from a very large scale as well. And I think Europe should be more open and should have a global view and not only a European view on its market assessment. And of course, when they say China is a closed market, not open market, and therefore we don't take China into account in our assessment, I think it's absurd. So they do that. Now we are looking ahead. Now we have this new project with Bombardier, and we'll continue, and we are investing even more in all digital technologies in order to catch up with all innovation possible.
Thank you very much. It's very clear. But could you give us your opinion on this shift of policies? Because, I mean, a few months ago, you were denied the merger with Siemens, and now the European Commissioner allows you to buy out Bombardier. So could you give us your opinion, or at least, I mean, I don't know, you could explain it?
No, I think there are two things. The first one, probably the most important one, is that Bombardier is not as present as Siemens in the digital part of the business, and therefore it was an easier file, technically speaking. Now you're right as well. It's also the policy has changed, the political context has changed, and it's true that we have in the world a geopolitical context which is progressively changing. I don't know if it's always for the good, but you see an increasing level of nationalism in the world, increasing level, therefore, of localization of our production everywhere in the world. And this has we understand why it's the case in a number of places. It also introduces more complexity in the way you do business if you have to take into account all local requirements everywhere in the world. So there is a balance between the two, but it's clear that we see this trend in Europe as well.
You mentioned the importance of the digital sector in Siemens when you tried to merge with them. What does digitalization mean for a firm like Alstom, except from being more efficient, being more able to trace your trains? Could this digitalized world be a force for good if you want to move towards a greener mobility?
Yeah, I think digitalization helps you in general to save investment. And we use it a lot, so as I said, in maintenance, to do predictive maintenance, and this is to save, of course, the replacement of spare parts and things like that, and as importantly, this is to predict when there will be a problem, and therefore to ensure an availability of the train which is much higher. You use safety, you use digitalization on all what is traffic management. We have launched a new software, a new program called Mastria, for example, which is doing a global optimization of the global system. For example, we have that in La Défense. It's a prototype so far. And if you have an incident in the area A in La Défense, then this system will compute how this incident will diffuse in Paris and what to do in order to compensate. You could say quite easily you have to put more metro line 1 because it's the same route, but you can also put more buses. You can change the traffic light so that the buses are faster to put the people wherever they want, to bring the people wherever they want, and so forth and so forth. So you have the fluidity of a system is extremely important in order to increase its efficiency. A transport system usually works very well on, and you know that as well, on normal circumstances. And each time you have an incident in a global complex transport system, this incident is propagating everywhere. And then it's a catastrophe, and then maybe some of you have spent 10 hours in a train, a few hours in a train, because it's extremely difficult to move from a degraded mode to a normal mode. And digital systems help you to do that. And today we have to recognize that most of the transport systems are relatively dummy. I mean, they don't integrate as much intelligence as they could.
Thank you. This was very clear. So the digitalization could help fluidify the transportation system so that people use these common transportations at its best. So from now on, I would like to dwell on your vision of management in general, from your manager position, since you hold a heavy one, and which we would like to put this position in perspective with you, namely the CEO position.
Yeah, a first topic we would like to talk about is how you manage a succession at the position of CEO. I mean, you took up this post right after an internal management crisis, and your predecessor, Patrick Cron, just managed the crisis in 2014 with General Electrics. So how, by taking this post, how do you strike a proper balance between a smooth continuity with your predecessor and also a shift of management as you are, different from him?
Yeah, I think I need to explain maybe a little bit what has happened at the time, because there was not a real succession in the way you are saying. When I was appointed CEO in 2015 or 16, I think it has been said, actually I was already the head of the transport division, and the rest of the group was sold. So I was leading the transport division since 2011, basically. And then all of a sudden I wake up and all my colleagues have left the room. So I was alone, and then I took the position of CEO of the group quite naturally. And internally, by the way, even the headquarters of Alstom was sold. So the new headquarters of Alstom was actually the headquarters of the division itself. So the real succession that I had to go through was actually when I arrived in transport, or in 2011. And here, there is no, I've never been to a management school, so I don't know exactly, but there is no such thing as a balance. The only thing I can say is that you arrive somewhere, and what people are expecting from you is just that things are working. They don't expect from you, unless you are in a huge crisis and a huge problem and so forth, they don't expect from you a complete revolution day one. They just expect from you that you solve the problems they have in their day-to-day life. And that's a lesson from the crisis, by the way, from the COVID crisis, is that we never empower enough the people. And when you arrive, they have problems, and you can see that things are not working, that things are there are some tension, that the company is not moving in that direction it should, and so forth. And the first thing you do is probably to see these problems and to solve them, and to show to the people that by being where you are, you can help them to perform better. And that, because this is the first goal is to help the people to perform their duties. They know what they have to do in general, and therefore it's really to create the right environment and the right culture so that it fosters competence and excellence.
So, in the first phase, you are more people-focused, and then you take the strategy.
Yeah, the very, very first is always people focus, of course, to get to have the cohesion of the people and so forth. The strategy, usually companies, again, unless you come in a place where it's a complete chaos, a complete disaster, the companies have their own strategy, and you have to think and to see and to try to think ahead to orient the company wherever you want the company to go. And this takes, of course, a little bit more time to do so. You do that together with all the colleagues and so forth. So that's, yes, you need to set, of course, you need to set the vision at one point in time, but you can take a little bit of time for that.
Thank you. And since you told us that you kind of became CEO out of the blue by chance, do you believe that being a CEO is something that one can learn? And did your financial background at Alstom or your career help you become a better CEO than somebody else would have been? For instance, if you had been having a career in marketing or operations, what would be the difference from somebody who has a career in finance?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question. Of course, in my career, when I joined Alstom, so after having been at the French Treasury, I wanted to do some operational job. So didn't want to enter into finance at all. And then, you know, life is like that. And I was proposed some job in finance. I was proposed to be the CFO. And so I said, why not? And I learned some finance by doing it. I think there's no one single, you got very bright CEOs having gone through marketing, production, finance, whatever, R&D. I mean, there is no one silver bullet to become a good CEO or a bad CEO. I think it's really the question of the management. And it's difficult, but I should not say that here, but I feel that management, you don't really learn management, you live through management, you live through it, your experience, you need to always listen, you know, so to always be curious, to always listen to your colleagues. And there is I don't know, it may not be in all companies, in all culture, but there is a kind of democracy in a company, so you become CEO if naturally you are accepted by the company. Sometimes CEOs are coming from external because, again, there is a crisis. But when they come internally, you need to have a general consensus that this person will be appropriate as a CEO. And as we talk about CEOs, but the same for a head of a division, a head of a business. You need to be accepted as such, and this is what is the most important thing.
Thank you for this very clear answer. You mentioned the fact that when arriving in Alstom, you didn't expect to stay there maybe for this long time. And I would like to ask you a question on behalf of a lot of students at HEC Paris who may hesitate in the beginning of their career between two paths, the public path and the corporate one. Since you have experienced both worlds, being at the French Treasury and then in Alstom, a corporate company, what concrete managerial difference did you experience, and what atmosphere would you recommend to anybody hesitating between both?
No, I think I have no advice to give. It really depends on the personality of the people. I think it's a very different world. Although I left this state-owned and the public world for a long time now, but in the public world, everything is much more structured. You have a goal, which is usually a very high goal to serve your country. So that's extremely, extremely rewarding to some extent. It's much more. It's much heavier, and usually what I say in terms of empowerment, we feel that there are much more empowerment on the corporate world than, of course, on the public world. It's a different type of a structure, a different type of mindset. When I joined the French Treasury, I knew day one that I would not stay long. I wanted to stay 3 years, 4 years maximum. It was a fantastic experience, and it helped me to understand a lot of things. But then I knew that this was not my natural, I would say, universe. One thing which is extremely important, when you go to a company, you need to feel good in this company. That's it. And I love to be in Alstom because I think the culture is appropriate. There's a very positive culture in Alstom where people are helping each other to succeed. And the goal of Alstom is extremely positive. I would not feel good working in other companies which I think are not serving the proper development of the world. Now, I mean, everybody has its own view of what should be the proper development of the world, its own view of what is needed for this development, and therefore decide where to go. But you can succeed only if you are profoundly and deeply satisfied with what you do on a day-to-day.
Thank you. You told us that the public world was way more structured than the corporate world in Alstom, for instance. So would you say, since we are all in HEC appealed to learn to dare, would you say that people tend to dare more in corporate companies, especially in Alstom, than in the public sector?
Well, of course, I mean, again, depending on where you want to work, but there are companies, and at Alstom, we tend to boost agility. You know, we have values as everybody, so we have agility is one of our values, inclusiveness, responsibility. And when you are a young talent and you need to implement a new tramway line, I don't know, in a city in Ecuador like Cuenca, for example, it's a real case, then of course you need to tackle a number of issues on a day-to-day basis. And again, this requires a lot of agility, a lot of entrepreneurship from the people. And yes, again, the COVID, and I feel that we need to empower these people. And yes, they can take a lot of initiatives. They have one goal, which is to deliver their project. The company is here to help them, both technologically and in terms of processes and in terms of all sorts of return on experience, how to do things, and so forth. But fundamentally, they are responsible for their job. So yes, there is a lot of flexibility in the way they do their job.
Thank you very much. So we all guess that the transportation industry, I mean, as every heavy industry in general, is historically a sector very masculine. So we'd like to ask you, what's your position towards this? I mean, we're talking about female-male parity, but we could talk about all diversities. So how do you think that, I mean, do you have a long-run vision for a more diverse company to reflect more the real people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, as I said, one of our values is to be inclusive. Gender diversity is part of that. One fundamental reason, I mean, there are a lot of reasons behind. One of them is that we believe that we design systems, solutions, trends, which are used by everybody, from different culture, different origin, of course, men, women, and so forth. So in our DNA, we should have the ability to design all these systems with any kind of eyes. So we are pushing all type of programs. In terms of, as I said, we are a global company, so we need to make sure that all nationalities feel at home when working at Alstom, that there is no discrimination, that there is no feeling of being badly treated because you're coming from one nationality or another, and so forth. So, and in terms of gender diversity, yes, you're absolutely correct. We have only 20-ish% of women in Alstom. We have a goal to go to 25. It's a small goal. 25 is very low. If you compare to 20, it's a jump. Of course, we have the bad excuse to say that in the engineering school you have also roughly 20% of women. So it's an effort that we need to do. But by the way, I'm not saying that just because I'm fronting all of you, but there are not only engineers in Alstom, and you have a lot of senior positions which are not necessarily held by engineering background. Because again, our first job is to deliver projects, and that can be done by all sorts of origin in terms of educational background. So we are pushing, it's extremely important. We have pushed a number of programs to make sure that women feel at ease in Alstom, because frankly, I'm shocked by the fact that there are only 20%. But I'm even more shocked by the fact that more women are leaving Alstom, and then even in functions where you have 50% at the beginning, like in finance, and it tends when you progress in the career to decrease. And this is even more shocking that in pure engineering, when you have 20% at the beginning and 20% at all the steps of the organization. So there are a lot of progress to do, but we are implementing all that.
And how do you explain this this phenomenon of women leaving?
I think I see it as an issue of we need to go above the wave. The problem is that if there are 20%, it's too small, and therefore maybe we have not put in place the right measures. Maybe despite all the effort that we are doing, we are far from being perfect, and probably there are still a feeling that it's not totally appropriate, and therefore some are leaving. So we continue to work on that and monitor very precisely all that.
Thank you. Just to finish the discussion part, I'd like to ask you two questions. What is the biggest challenge to wake up every day in the shoes of a CEO, and what purpose is your motivation on a day-to-day basis to go to work and being the CEO of Alstom for one more day?
No, the challenge, I mean, it depends on the companies. We have a technological challenge in Alstom because we have innovation. But having said that, I'm not in an industry whereby I fear every day that one of my competitors will go out of the market with a new solutions, which 3 months later will sort of kill my market. So my first challenge as a CEO is to make sure that the company runs smoothly. We have a large number of projects in our portfolio, and if you want the company to move forward, if you want the company to innovate, if you want the company to grow, one thing which is extremely important is that the company works, as I said, smoothly, i.e. not in a crisis mode. And if you start to have project problems, execution problems in too many areas, then the whole company will be just focused on solving these problems, and the company will become firefighters. And then you cannot move when you are only firefighters. So day to day, I'm just checking that the company is in good shape, i.e. that the commercial activity is working, but also project execution is there. So I'm dedicating a lot of time to monitor the balance of the company. Because I know that this is, again, the number one thing in order for the company to move. And then precisely, and that's to your point, what I love the most as a CEO is to see the company moving. So it's to see after, not every day I have to say, but after a few months, after 1 year, to see things which were not there a few years ago. When you see, and this is, in Alstom, it's relatively easy to see. First, because in terms of projects, as I said, you are in Riyadh, you are in elsewhere, you are in Lima, you are inaugurating the new line in Lima. This line will enable some people who in the past took like 2 hours and a half to go to work walking, because in some cities you are not replacing car by metros, you are replacing foot by metros, and these people the day after will take only 15 minutes, 20 minutes to go to work. So you can see the immense progress that you introduce in their life. So this is extremely rewarding on a day-to-day. And then as a company itself, you can say that the company has introduced a new product. For example, I'm extremely proud of the hydrogen train. I think the fact that we were the first one to launch this hydrogen train 5-6 years ago, where the hydrogen was not necessarily doing the headlines and so forth, and that we have this hydrogen train which is now perceived as being probably the number one solution to decarbonized rail transportation, is extremely positive, and it's a matter of pride. So you have lots of positive elements which helps you to, as you said, to wake up every morning.
Thank you for these very clear and to-the-point answers. So
we'll go for the questions. We'll start with the question of the public here, but don't worry, for the public in Zoom, you'll have the next one. So if you have any question, just raise your hand and we'll give you a mic. if you could stand up and we'll hand you, yeah, thank you.
Okay. So yeah, my question was on prices. I see in Europe that a lot of people don't take the train because it's too expensive compared to the plane. So do you have ideas to solve that problem? Should we tax more planes? Should we find ways to make trains cheaper? What is your opinion on that?
No, that's a very complex question. Why? Because it's true that railway systems in the world are heavily subsidized, and in particular urban transport system. I think there is only one city in the world, I think it's Santiago, which has at the moment managed to run an urban system without any subsidies. So the price of a train ticket depends a lot on the subsidies. So I think the answer to your point is twofold. One, we need to decrease the cost of a system, definitively. And to decrease the cost of a system is to improve its efficiency. That's why also I'm pushing for having common standards in Europe, because I feel that all the different standards are increasing a lot the cost of the different systems. So there is a lot we can do. I can say quite candidly that the railway industry in general is far from being efficient. We are developing new trains and new trains and new trains, where we could have similar trains for similar. I mean, metros could be much more similar in the world from a technical standpoint. I mean, everybody is the same around the world, so you could have the same kind of metros from a technical standpoint. This is far from being the case. So there is a lot to do to decrease the cost of the trains. Now, your point on planes and cars, I would love to have a proper valuation of all the negative, what you call all the negative externalities of all mobility systems. So when you are doing a long period, I was always saying that planes are a kind of escaping their responsibilities from an environmental perspective, because not only they were not paying CO2 taxes and so forth, but they were not paying at all taxes on their fuel. They are not part of the ETS system in Europe and so forth. So I think the difficulty that we have is to proper value the externalities of the different systems. If you take the urban system, if you take, for example, a metro line or Area A in France, you know the Area A in Paris is the most crowded system in the full Europe. It's 1 million, 1.2 million passengers per day. This is equivalent to 4 times the ring around Paris. So how do you value the space that you save by having a few areas underground instead of having, I don't know, 16 lanes of cars around Paris? These are complex systems. So unfortunately, there is no on CO2. If I could, I would promote a price of CO2 which will be more around the 400, 500 euro per ton rather than what it is today. So that you can do, but for all the other externalities, you cannot price everything, and therefore you need to regulate. And hence, yes, I am for more regulation of the systems to try to address this issue of externalities. Because at the end of the day, when you say cars are cheaper than metros, for example, yes, but cars are using Champs-Élysées freely, whereas metro, they had to build their tunnels to move. So it's very different. So yes, we need to, I don't know if it's to tax, I'm in favor of a CO2 tax, of course, but you need to more generally price all externalities.
So now it will be a Zoom question, if it's ready.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
You said in your introduction of the company that it was the first to invest in hydrogen technology. And first, I wanted to know if you think this investment is kind of useful in the French market, considering the fact that the energy for trains is made out of nuclear power. And secondly, it would be to know if you count on the evolution of the hydrogen production, which is not carbon free for now, to integrate new markets. Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, we have, and hopefully we'll announce soon, some trains in France based on hydrogen. Of course, these trains are for the non-electrified line. So you have half of the network in France which is non-electrified. There are 25% of the fleet in France which is not electrified. So we need to replace these trains or to electrify the lines. It's extremely costly to electrify a line, and it's much cheaper just to find solution for the trains. So I think it's definitively one solution. So we are introducing the trains hopefully by 2022, 2023. And SNCF has committed that by 2035, all the trains in France will be decarbonized. And therefore, there is all this fleet to be replaced, and there will be different type of trains to replace them, but all running on hydrogen. Now, the question on the green hydrogen. Of course, I'm very much committed to green hydrogen, which is based upon electrolysis. There is a debate today between France and Germany on this green hydrogen, because in Germany they call the hydrogen based upon electricity in France blue hydrogen, because it's being produced from nuclear power and not renewable. In Germany, they are more advanced than in France. On our trains, which are running in northern Germany, there are some fueling stations which are fully integrated. So there is a project of a fueling station producing hydrogen from wind farms. So you have the wind farms, the electrolyzer, the hydrogen tank, and this system is fueling the trains which are running on the line. So yes, we need to go in that direction. I mean, we cannot today. It's fair to recognize that 90% of the hydrogen is brown or dark or however you call it, made from oil. So you need to move to green. I don't want to enter into the debate of whether nuclear is as green as wind and so forth from a CO2 emission. But that's what is for sure, is that we need to have green hydrogen.
So now we'll have a question from the people.
Okay, thank you very much for taking my question. Good evening, Mr. Poupart-LAFARGE. I'm very delighted to have you here because actually, fun fact, I wrote my Master's of Finance thesis on the Alstom Siemens fusion. So I'll ask you another question about antitrust regulation, but a more precise one. Finance research shows that the antitrust regulation intervention in M&A is increasing over the last decade with globalization. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're facing some of the same challenges that the big tech stocks are facing with an increasing competitive harming power. My question then is, as a CEO and with the incredible network that you have now, how do you design a long-term strategy that allows you to counter this, value destruction antitrust constraint? And how do you ensure that you can still grow with acquisition in the long run?
Well, I mean, as being shown by the example of Bombardier, I think we have moved, and I think we've been open to that. I think it's a long process. This issue of antitrust, and Siemens has been very vocal on it, because Siemens is also in the software business, and they were feeling that it's unfair to block some of the European companies while you have very global platform in other places in the world. So I think it's what you say, as a CEO, you always need to be pragmatic. So there's two things. One is to try to be vocal and express your ideas and your experience and how you feel things should evolve on the regulatory framework. But then, as a CEO of a company, you need to run your company in the current framework. So we need a little bit to dissociate. And I think I've been relatively open saying on what I was thinking about what has happened with Siemens. And we have pushed and we have explained, and there have been a lot of, there is an initiative in France and in Germany to revisit the antitrust regulation, because in the US, for example, and in Europe, it's very different. The philosophy is extremely different. I'm not going into the detail, but we want to move towards more a US type of philosophy, and that we are participating to all these kind of efforts. But of course, as I said, as a company, I'm not going to sit and cry. I need to go on, and we have other projects, and we are doing other projects.
If someone's ready for a Zoom question, thank you.
Yes, hi, bonjour. So my question is regarding innovations such as the Hyperloop or air taxis. Do you consider them already as a threat, as a competition, or not at all yet?
So it's a good question. I will generalize it a little bit by saying that will we have some disrupting technologies in mobility? I do consider that to some extent hydrogen is really a change in our way to run trains. But then you could have other types, so we have the flying taxis and things like that. I don't believe it will be anywhere soon. For me, that does not correspond. It could be a niche, but that does not correspond to the vision of sustainability. If you want to be sustainable, to go on a flying taxi, which is probably using huge energy just to lift the car and so forth, it does not correspond to any fluidity as well. So it may be, I don't know if Airbus or other companies are interested by that. It may be a niche somehow, but it cannot be the main system. Railway systems will be the backbone of the transportation system. I'm not saying, of course, that railway system will serve any need, and in particular, the very low density needs. But everywhere where there will be high density, the railway system will be much more efficient than this kind of solution. Then you talk about Hyperloop. Hyperloop is of course, there are a lot of debates on Hyperloop, and we have looked at that very closely. It's a combination of two technology. Which really, I don't really believe in it, which is to create the void, emptiness in a tube in order to decrease any resistance, the air resistance in the tube. Frankly, the energy needed to create this void and this emptiness is so large that I don't think it can ever work. Then there's another technology which is combined with this one, which is suspended trains. So this is a nice technology. It exists already in China. Some of you have been to Shanghai, and you go to Shanghai airport to Shanghai city, and you can take this kind of trains which are suspended on magnetic systems. There was some project in Germany which have been abandoned, but there are some projects in Japan and so forth. So this is a technology that, of course, we are looking at. It can only be used for new network. It's quite complex, quite expensive, and you need to have a very, very, very strict, I would say, concrete beams and so forth. So it's not easy to do. However, I think that can work. So we are, and that's if we want to grow, and if we want to acquire Bombardier, it's precisely because I believe that you need to have a sufficient size and you need to be sufficiently present in all places in the world to have the early signals of these new technologies emerging and to be able to detect which technologies could emerge really and which are the ones which are not emerging. And it's fair to recognize that in China, they are usually prototyping most of these new technologies. So we need really to be very attentive. And I'm not a fan of Hyperloop, but I think there are some technological pieces which can be useful and used in the future.
Thank you very much. A question here. Does anyone have the mic? Or?
Yes, thank you very much. 6 years later, what's the deal with General Electric? Sorry, a mistake.
Sorry, what did you say?
Yes, so 6 years after the deal with General Electric, was the deal a mistake?
The deal with General Electric?
Yes.
Was it a mistake?
Yes.
I never look at things like that, but it's you have what is globally a mistake, so to say. It's not the deal itself. I think the deal is the end, is the fact that Alstom, as a company, and maybe France as an industry, I don't know, has not been able to address the energy transition. So Alstom was very much present in steam turbines for nuclear power plants, for coal-fired power plants, present in gas turbines, but we were not enough present, and we have not anticipated enough, we have not invested enough into the renewable energy. There are some reasons as well behind that, because when it was time to do it in 2004, we probably had not the means to do it, because this was at a time where Alstom had huge financial difficulties. It's not an excuse, but this is why I think we need to be global in the world, because France, as a country, was very late into adopting renewable energy. And it's not easy when you are very much centered in one country to see a global market and not to be too much influenced by the country in which you are based. And clearly, in terms of adopting the wind energy, France was extremely late. So it's no surprise that Alstom was late as well, and I'm not talking about solar energy. But it's true, that for France, it's true for Europe as well. I mean, solar has been vastly adopted in China, wind has been vastly adopted in China before. Then, at the time of the deal itself, to answer to your question, frankly, steam, what has been sold, which is a steam technology, I think GE will stop it now. So it's the gas technology has dropped a lot. If you were asking General Electric whether they think it was a good deal, they will probably answer to you, it's a very, very bad deal that they did. So from a financial perspective, it was for GE a bad deal, and therefore for Alstom a very good deal. And it has helped, very selfishly, I have to say, that the transport division, therefore, went reinforced by this deal. So personally, I'm of course extremely pleased with that. The issue is that it was too late. It was too late. Alstom was not present in the renewable energy, and Siemens, which was very much stronger than Alstom, was also in deep crisis in this conventional energy. And this is what happens when you don't anticipate enough change in the market. Extremely difficult. But we bet a lot on carbon capture and so forth. This could have worked, but this has not worked. Carbon capture, it's today, maybe in the future it will be, but today not a solution to address the CO2 emission.
Thank you for these precisions. I would like to ask a question about this. You are having the chance to buy out Bombardier while you try to merge with Siemens. Do you believe that buying out an international player such as Bombardier is a better choice than a German one such as Siemens in the context of a global competition?
I think Siemens is also, of course, a global company. It's true that as I said, Bombardier is more global, less present in digital technologies. Siemens is less global. They are very present in Germany, in the UK, in the US, but not everywhere in the world. But they were more present in digital technologies. So there is no, one is superior to the other one necessarily in all domains. We need to compensate. That's why we are investing a lot, as I said, in digital technology. We are also acquiring smaller companies to enrich our portfolio. So it addresses two different aspects.
Okay, thank you. So now a Zoom question, if one is ready.
Hello, Mr. HTL. My name is Ashish. From past 6 years, I was a Alstom colleague in India. So it's nice to listen to you after a year doing an MBA here in HEC. My question is related to the successful deployment of master station in Panama this year, and after that we have successful one of the powerful locomotive which was delivered in India, and now we have the deal of Bombardier collaborating with Alstom. So I see Alstom is doing really well, from last year. And now my question is related to the new strategy, how Alstom is moving towards the sustainable and the greener transportation, basically. So how do you see the hydrogen trains coming to India in some time, or what is the strategy for that?
Thank you. So we are very much present in India indeed, and this is one of the key topic of our globalization. So we were probably a few hundred 10 years ago. Today we are close to 6,000. Basically 20% of our engineering globally is done in India. But not only here, it is an engineering center for the world, but we have also a number of factories, including electrical locomotives, to serve the Indian market itself. So the Indian market is extremely important for us. Of course, there are a large number of large cities, a lot of urban activities, but also in terms of mainline. I don't think the hydrogen train, to answer to the question, will not be introduced in India very soon. Why? Because India is going through a very, very large investment of electrification. So today, electrification of the lines. So today, the main goal of India is to electrify the main lines, and mostly the lines dedicated to freight. That's why we are producing locomotive. And you know, you were asking what was as a CEO, what drives you, and frankly, when you go, so a few years, 2 to 3 years ago, there was nothing, and now you go in the middle of the Bihar state. The Bihar state is a quite poor state of India, and you go in the middle, close to what we call Madhepura, which is a city which is quite also a poor cities in the Bihar state. And we have implemented in this state an electrical loco factory, which is now producing very regularly some locomotives. And most of the people, including people in India, didn't believe that we could do it in this place. We have not decided, to be fair, to choose this place, but this place was required by the Indian Railway, and we did it. And I can tell you that this gives also a very, very large pride and enthusiasm to see that this is now a new factory capable of producing electrical loco for the Indian market.
Hi, thank you for all the work you're doing on sustainability. I think a lot of us here can appreciate it. When you're looking ahead into the future, let's say 20 years, where do you see the role of hydrogen trains being at that point? As they are, just the process of making hydrogen is less efficient than just using electricity straight from the grid. Thank you.
So it's a very good question. I think the question is, what will be the hydrogen economy in 20 years? Because I see basically two options. Either it will remain a small niche, and therefore we'll have hydrogen trains on some of the lines, as I said, the non-electrified line, particularly for long distances and so forth. If hydrogen economy is becoming a real economy, then not only the trains will run on hydrogen, but you'll have the buses, the trucks, maybe some cars, that there is a debate on whether battery will be sustainable or not for that, but also all types of industries. You can have the steel industry using hydrogen, chemistry using hydrogen, and so forth. And here, you can believe that hydrogen trains will even replace today's electrified trains. There is one common feature trend in our industry is to try to minimize all the infrastructure, as I said, all what is trackside. For example, our signaling systems in the past, the signaling system which are monitoring the trains, they were installed trackside. So you have every 500 meters, 1 kilometer, some equipment. Of course, this is extremely costly to manage, to maintain. This is extremely costly to run, and so forth. So what you do now, and what we have done in Lille, for example, is to put everything in the trains so that the trains can discuss with each other. It's the same thing for electrification. To maintain catenaries is extremely costly. When you have storms, whatever, you have problems on catenaries, and usually, if you take the trains, usually when there are problems, you hear that it's because of a catenary issue. And so if you have good economies of hydrogen, and therefore if the cost of hydrogen, and particularly of the green hydrogen, becomes sustainable at €5, whatever, relatively small, then you could replace even lines which are today electrified through catenaries by hydrogen trains. So it can become the majority of the trains. But for that, you need to have a global hydrogen economy, which is still being questioned in the short term.
If a Zoom question is ready. No? Okay. So anyone in here? Yeah, many people. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So hi, thank you first, Mr. Poupart-LAFARGE, for being here. So my question is, as you faced a refusal for the fusion with Siemens, what do you think of the current announcement of Veolia regarding Suez? And like, isn't it like an already lost cause?
Thank you for the question, but I cannot really speak on behalf. I don't know, frankly, I don't know. I don't think that I would say the system is the same. They have announced, Veolia has announced that anyhow they have already preempt the question by disposing part of Suez. So frankly, it's two very different cases. And I think they have done their due diligence, as we say, and they probably know what they do.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I think one of the biggest things to do next is to try to have a very reactive network of trains. So like when you said that you have a train problem and then you react really quickly on the network. So I think that's the biggest issue we have today. And I was wondering if you're benchmarking somewhere else or even in the other industries. Like we have this problem also in energy and the grids. So I think it's very similar. So that's my question.
Yes, no, but you're absolutely right. The energy in the past, and I was working for a while for grid, for the network, and yes, the energy had to tackle this issue of balancing of the grid for a long time, because as you probably know, the grid has to be balanced every second, while transportation is not. And my first reaction when I moved from grid, so from my previous position to transport, was really to find that our systems in transport were relatively dummy, and that in grid things were managed at the microseconds, and in transport, it's of course you have much more time to manage it. And also the systems today are very, as I said, very human. For example, take a very concrete example. You have line 1. It's because you need to have to be flexible. You need to be automated. We have not a lot discussed about the automatization of the trains, whether we talk about automation of the metros or of the trains themselves. The interest of being automated is not to save the salary of the driver. The main reason behind the automatization is the flexibility of the operation, precisely to do what you say, and also to save energy, because it's true to recognize that the machine is driving better the train than a human, and therefore saves energy in a complete trip. But today, to come back to your example, when you have on line 1 some metros, if you have a football match, or in the past, when you had a football match with a huge crowd, then there is somebody behind its camera seeing the crowd going outside Parc des Princes in Paris, and they will put more vehicles in the line to address this issue. But they will see it, and if the match lasts a little bit longer, they will wait for that and so on. So now what we are introducing is the way to count the number of passengers, for example, in the corridors, to have more data, and Mastria, the system that we are introducing, takes into account all the weather conditions, police indications, and so forth. Because most of the systems that you have on Google and Waze and so forth, these systems do not address the response. They address the demand, so they can tell you how long you will take to go from point A to point B, but they will not give some instruction to the transport system to increase the capacity of this route or to change the traffic here and there. So all what we do is to try to have a demand response system on simple things like a line, or more complex things as a full network, and to make it more automated as a global system. But you are right, the energy systems are much more regulated today, much precisely regulated than a transport system.
Thank you very much.
Hi, sir.
Yep.
I had a question on, well, Alstom has a long tradition as a public supplier and an industrial flagship for France to be linked with the government and the French Administrativo engineering complex. You embody it as a X-Pont. Your predecessor was a X-Min, so it's quite the same. Both as a normative level, what are your views on this special relationship? Is it a burden or help to be a flagship for France? And is it changing with the brand globalization? And your successor will be French, Indian, Chinese, polytechnician, engineer or not? Like, is it possible to imagine one day a foreigner CEO of Alstom?
So the answer is we are. You see that in France, that we are close to the French government, but we are close to all governments in the world. So yes, lots of our roots are in France or in Europe, but because of our activity, rail is always extremely visible. I mean, we are a relatively small company. We are 8 billion company. For an industrial group, it's not an extremely large company, but we have a visibility in all the world. We are talking India, for example, we have 6,000 people in India. It's not a huge number of people as compared to other types of industry. I can tell you that the visibility of Alstom in India is great because of the nature of our business. So yes, we have this proximity. So I'm not wondering whether it's a plus or a minus. The states, the French state, is a customer. It's a partner. It's a customer. It's there. Our industry is regulated. Now, to your point, of course, my successor one day can be of any origin, any country. That's not an issue. And we have in our management team, we have people from a lot of different countries, and we tend to have more and more, of course, local people to manage our local organization. And as our global organization is organized by region and by country, the head of the Asian region is a Chinese woman in charge of all Asia, for example. And by the way, she's also she has done a management school as well, and not an engineering school. So there is no glass ceiling of any kind.
Thank you. We will now have our last question. So if there is somebody on Zoom ready to ask a question, let's have it. Otherwise, we'll have someone in the crowd. Nobody on Zoom, so somebody in the crowd.
Hello, thank you. You seem to support a shift of policy regarding antitrust regulations towards the American model, but economists such as Thomas Philippon have underscored the flaws of this model, especially for consumers and in terms of innovation. So don't you think that this potential policy shift could be harmful for European consumers, since the merger such as the one with Siemens does make sense on a global scale and does not impair competition on this scale, but could be harmful for European consumers?
Look, of course, I'm not a specialist of consumer per se. One difference, just to explain to you more in detail what I was thinking about. In the US, there is a notion, a concept of a contestable market. i.e., they look at whether there are some competitors which could potentially penetrate the market. And very practically, for Alstom, it means that they look at how many people are answering to tenders. In Europe, they are looking at market share and past market share. So they don't want to look forward. They say we are going to take the average of the last 10 years of market share. I think this does not take into account the momentum and the dynamism of the markets. It happens that the markets are moving extremely fast, and we need to be able to project ourselves. And also, it's not because you have won a contract that the customer could not put you in competition with different type of other competitors. So I think that the main philosophy is look ahead and contestable rather than look behind and pure market share. Now, there are some debates in the US on the global platform, on consumer and so forth. I'm far from this type of business, so I cannot say that for this type of business it could apply. But for the kind of industry in which we are, clearly, and I think lots of markets in telecom, it's the same. I'm not the only one to try to influence that. I mean, you know that in telecom, you have, I don't know how many tens of operators, if not hundreds of operators in Europe, while in the US you have 4 of them, in China you have 3 of them on similar type of markets. So it's not only my industry. I know that in lots of industries they are complaining about this lack of possibility to merge, and that's what we are moving for.
Thank you, Mr. Poupart-LAFARGE. Would you like to have the final words of this conference? If you have to give to all these students eager to enter the active life one thing, one guideline to follow, what would it be? Well,
I don't. It's difficult. First of all, it's a concluding word. I want just to thank all of you, and thank you for having organized this small exchange with all of you. I think it's difficult. As I told you before, it's the first time I do this kind of stuff, and I told myself that I would never do it before being in a position to be your father. So I said that now it's the case. So maybe I'm okay to give you advice. No, I think it's difficult to don't try to project yourself. Say I need to do that because if I do that, I will do that, and then I will do that, and so forth. So don't try to project yourself too long. I had no idea when I entered into Alstom that I would become a CEO of Alstom. Of course, I had no intention to do that. What you need to do is definitely choose something which motivates you, which you feel with your heart. And that will be, and then the rest, life will support you and will push you. So there is no, don't be don't think too much. Try to just go. There are so many opportunities, and the only advice I give again, do something which is positive for the future of the planet, and do something which really drives you for the future, and not something that you think you have to do.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to discuss with you about all of this. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
To take the exit, so we'll begin with the ranks, no, at the back, okay, and then move one to one. Please, thank you very much.